Welcome to Backstage Pass with Gail Davis, your invitation into the world of keynote speaking and event planning expertise. Join us as we pull back the curtain and dive into exclusive interviews with speaking industry experts. From seasoned speakers to master event planners, we're here to provide you with the ultimate backstage experience. Get ready to unlock valuable insights, tips, and strategies that will elevate your events and leave your audience inspired. Welcome to Backstage Pass. I'm your host, Gail Davis. Today, we are joined by a powerhouse woman who we have had the privilege here at GDA Speakers of partnering with consistently for our clients. I was looking this morning, and ironically, our first booking with Erica was in 2021. So this content and our relationship is really only 4 years old, and it feels like we've been working together forever. And I don't think it's a coincidence that your material became incredibly important during and coming out of the pandemic. And from the looks of things, it remains super relevant. I noticed this morning, Erica, that you are in 22 proposals. So I am really ready to dive into this. But first, just in case there's anyone listening that isn't familiar with you, I just want to hit the highlights on your background. Erica Dhawan is a leading authority on the 21st century teamwork, collaboration, and innovation. She is a Wall Street Journal best-selling author, has been named the Oprah of management thinkers, ranked #1 top female keynote speaker, and most recently, she was named to the Real Leaders Top 50 Keynote Speakers. Wow, Erica, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Gail. I love GDA, and I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's start with that last accolade. To be named top 50 keynote speakers is impressive, but especially when the other names on the list are people like Tony Robbins, Simon Sinek, Brené Brown. I mean, wow.
Thank you so much, Gail. You know, in many ways, I like to say keynote speaking was never a master plan for me. It was a calling. And in many ways, I believe that keynote speakers are meant to change the conversation in their industries. They're there to help people see with new eyes, gain new perspectives, and create transformative experiences. And I think that's what I focused on the last 14 years. So I'm truly humbled to be on that list. And also, I have to say, I couldn't have done it without amazing partners like GDA and others.
Oh, thank you. Well, you almost took the next question out of my mouth. I was going to say, I know success and recognition like that doesn't come overnight. So you mentioned you've been speaking for 14 years. Tell us a little bit about the background. How did you make the shift to get into speaking, and what were you doing prior to that?
Yeah. I like to say I would have never guessed I would be a keynote speaker. I was supposed to be a doctor, right? I grew up in an Indian immigrant family of physicians. My parents were Indian immigrants, and I was a really shy and introverted girl. I was top of my class as a student, but I really struggled to connect as a kid. And in many ways, one of the reasons I was able to assimilate as an immigrant, having an accent, was I became really good at reading body language cues. You know, the popular girls with their heads high, the cool kids slouching during school assemblies. And it taught me early on that it's not what we say, it's how we say it. And fast forward, 30, 40 years from there, communication became one of my powerhouse skill sets because of my own struggles as a kid with an accent growing up in the United States. I was able to get, hard job opportunities on Wall Street. I got 3 Ivy League degrees, studied way too much, right? But it was actually, after my experience working on Wall Street at Lehman Brothers, that I really thought about the importance of how we work in ways that I could devote my life to that. I worked through the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy and the collapse. And going through that experience, an experience that really transformed the world and economies, it really taught me that it's not what teams do, it's how teams work that leads to greatness. And that led me on my own journey. I did my graduate work at Harvard and MIT, and I stayed on as a researcher at Harvard Center for Public Leadership. And at that time, about 12, 13 years ago, many leaders were talking about key phrases like the age of technology, or millennials were a big topic. But really, what I wanted to do was ask a different question, which was, what are the leadership skills we really need in a 21st century marketplace? And it led me on a journey to write best-selling books, and in many ways fall into speaking, which is truly, I like to say, the calling that I never knew until I discovered it. It's allowed me to find my voice, to use my communication skill set, and to bring relevant topics to the marketplace now that we need most in a 21st century age.
That's something that I'm very curious about. How do you keep your content fresh and relevant?
Yeah. You know, I'll never forget being in 2012, I was asked to speak at the World Economic Forum at Davos. And I was speaking on a panel called New Models of Leadership. It was me and three CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. All three of them were over the age of 60. And the content was new models of leadership. And I'll never forget it because I had something really different to share as a, sort of older millennial Gen Xer, as someone that comes from a global background, as someone who has academic experience and research-based experience, but also corporate experience. What I have found is that to stay relevant, you have to be in the marketplace. You have to be able to connect with people with where they are now. And, my first journey of this experience was developing a body of work I call connectional intelligence. So we all talked about emotional intelligence in the 90s, but in today's age, our work is not just in face-to-face offices where we're seeing each other all the times. It's global, it's multi-generational, it's matrixed in so many ways. And the key now is not just our IQ, our EQ, but how we connect intelligently in today's modern environment. And then again, about 5 years later, what I saw was that there was not just traditional body language signals that were important in sales and business, but a new body of work that I call digital body language that I coined and wrote a best-selling book on, that really teaches us that now reading emails carefully is the new listening, writing clearly is the new empathy. And in many ways, the signals that we send through all of our communication mediums, when 70% of our communication mediums are virtual now, truly matter. And so I like to say that I'm constantly evolving in many ways, trying to stay relevant to the market as it is now. But I learn the most through my audiences. When I do over 80 keynotes a year, and I'm constantly asking them, what are the issues that matter most to you? And I like to say 10 years ago, it might have been topics like, remember social media as a topic? Now it's AI. Remember cybersecurity, right? Now it may be a different type of topic, especially related to, crises happening around the world. So, in many ways, I like to practice what I preach around connecting intelligently.
I want to go back and underscore something that you just mentioned very casually, that you have spoken 3 times in Davos at the World Economic Forum. Prior to starting GDA Speakers 25 years ago, I had a corporate career. And 1 year I got to represent my corporation at Davos. I wasn't doing any speaking, I was just attending, but what an incredible environment full of powerhouse attendees, lectures. I remember one day going through a buffet line and this gentleman asked if he could sit with me, and it was Quincy Jones. And I was like, holy cow. I mean, it's so impressive to think you've been there 3 times. Congratulations. I think that really speaks to that research angle behind your work and the credibility of having been in a corporate setting. So I think you got all that going for you.
Absolutely. One of the things that I think I loved about Davos, and I try to bring to all my keynote stages, is this idea of a multidisciplinary approach where you bring different examples from outside your industry and apply it to your industry, but you also make sure you you're really thoughtful and practical and research-based. And that's something that I love about that specific event every year. But I think it's something that we can all continually bring to our keynote stages and events we're a part of.
Erica, one of the things that I love about this industry is knowing all of these experts and having relationships and friendships. And the title of our podcast is Backstage Pass. So I was thinking, if you're up for it, that maybe I could talk to you about some of the things kind of behind the curtain that are digital communication challenges that maybe I've been working on, and see if you could give me advice.
Let's do it. Ask me anything, Gail.
Well, okay. First of all, I at times really feel that digital communications is invasive.
Mhm.
I'm hardwired to respond to things.
Yep.
I'm hardwired to have a sense of urgency. And so when people are texting me about business during the day, I feel like, oh my gosh, how am I even supposed to respond to this? I can't copy my teammate back. And then I don't know if I should take these one by one or just unload it all. I'm just going to unload it all, Erica. And then I'm hesitant to even link in with a person, because the next thing I know, they're going to be like, hey, are you up for coffee? Hey, attached is my PowerPoint. And, help. I want to be likable. I want to respond, but it feels invasive. Oh, and the calendar invite. When someone just puts something on your calendar, you didn't even have a discussion about it, and it's there. Okay, I feel better. Help me.
Gail, we are living in an always on culture where I believe we have to set new norms around how we respond, how we engage, and how we connect. Let's remember what work was like 10 years ago. When we went home, and after hours, we went home. We took off our coat. We weren't often looking at our phones the entire time. Now, at a dinner table and evening hours, we're getting Slacks, we're getting text messages, and this need or feeling that we have to constantly respond is prevalent for everyone. Here's what I like to say. I wrote a New York Times op-ed that came out a year ago called "Why Ignoring a Text or Email Isn't Always Rude." One of the things we often feel when we get those constant messages, whether it's a text, an email, a request for a call, a LinkedIn message, is that we feel if we don't respond, we're ghosting them. We've often heard of the phrase ghosting from the romantic world, if someone got ghosted in their dating life, but that is now a real issue in the workplace, where people feel like, you ghosted me in the workplace. You didn't respond to my message. I like to say we have to reframe that in our always on culture, to think not just that we're ghosting someone, but instead we're triaging. When you think about an ER room doctor, they're constantly triaging messages, around patients. What is urgent? What is life or death threatening that I need to handle now? Then they're looking at what can wait a day or 3 days, right? And then they're looking at what could wait 1 to 3 weeks or say a month. And they are triaging patients. Well, I like to say we have to triage texts, emails, Slacks, constant messages in our business culture now. And in order to do that, I always recommend leaders to talk about specific communication norms with their teams, and specifically talk about 3 key factors. The first is complexity, the second is urgency, and the third is frequency. First, complexity. When things are complex, let your team know to not send a text message, to not even sometimes send a Slack, to maybe send a detailed agenda for a call that needs to happen, so people know why they're coming, but schedule that call and discussion and have a really good agenda in advance. If it's not complex, send a really quick email. If it is really urgent, yes, maybe move to text, but have a discussion with your team around what should be a text message and what should be an email so it's recorded. Second is urgency, right? Do you need it in 5 minutes or 5 days? It's really important to have norms around this. Otherwise, what I like to say is digital natives will text and Slack all the time, and those I call digital adapters will call people up and email all the time. So you want to make sure, right? You want to make sure you have some clear norms around this. And the third is frequency. How often are we connecting in these different environments? For some members of your team, Gail, they might be completely comfortable on text, from 5 to 10 p.m. at night. It's fine for them. For others, it's intrusive. And so again, having some norms around what are our frequency of communication in these different environments. I'll give you an example. I know one leader, he was overwhelmed by his email flow and he couldn't keep up. So what he did is he called it hybrid office hours, where twice a week he'd get on a video call. Anyone could join to solve problems. It was like a scheduled water cooler moment, but for his global team. And what it did is it reduced a lot of those inefficient, it was like a huddle, but virtual first. And it reduced a lot of those inefficient emails that were 5-minute questions that turned into 30-minute video calls.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Okay. Well, still, helping me through some things I'm aware of. I was a member of a small group of about 8 people, exactly 8 people, very diverse group. We had people from the age of 29 until, let's just say not 29. And I recently decided to move on from that group, and we had a really good closure session. Everybody went around the room. They said super duper nice things, but there were also some jokes that have kind of stuck with me. And I'm like, I got some good feedback at that. So one time we were going back and forth in this group of 8 people. I believe it was on email. And I don't know if we were trying to decide on what we were ordering for lunch or we were trying to reschedule a meeting. But at one point, it just felt like every 2 seconds, another response was coming in. And so I may or may not have said something like, come on, guys, let's not reply all.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a lot of grief for that. So how could I have handled that better? These people don't work for me. We're peers.
Yeah.
We're all entrepreneurs. And I don't think I handled that well. Ouch.
Well, Gail, first of all, give yourself some grace because we do have a reply epidemic. I will be honest about that. So, I think many of us can agree we've been in that situation like you, where there are constant messages that are being shared and people aren't really being thoughtful about whether others need to be on those messages or not. And I like to say in today's age, valuing visibly is valuing people's time, inboxes, and schedules. Now, when we send messages to others, we are sending them based on 2 other factors: trust and power. How much do we trust each other? Are we close friends? Is this a new acquaintance or a potential prospect? And second, what is our power differential? Are we equal? Is this a junior team member? Or, again, is this someone that I'm trying to raise my status with? Now, I like to say in this type of situation that you just shared, this is different than maybe you messaging a direct report, right? So with a direct report, I actually think it's pretty much okay to say, please don't reply all, right? Respect my time, I'm busy. With a client, I don't think you would do that, right?
No.
You want them to be able to share. I think where probably the mix-up happened here is there was high trust, but because there was sort of an equal power differential, there was a different reaction to your message. And this is where, again, sometimes what we say is not what we mean or what is received on the other side. So first and foremost, give yourself some grace. Second, I think other people felt the same thing, but you had the courage to say it. But one of the things we probably have to continually remember is when we are messaging others of an equal power level or a higher status, err on the side of formality first before getting to direct.
Okay. All right. So from this same group, from the going around the table, 2 of the younger members of the group, both male, jokingly said, we love you, Gail, but boy, we were so scared of you in the beginning. And I was like, why? And they go, the way you email. And I have been teased about this for decades, that when I write an email, I try to keep it like really simple, like thought, return, another thought, return, thought, return. And it was never my intention to be scary. It was my intention to be straightforward and simple. Thoughts?
First of all, I get you, sister. I am similar. I like to be, succinct, and brief and clear, right? We don't have time to waste. But what I've learned, and this story you just shared is something I've heard from a lot of executives when managing their teams as well, and also multi-generational teams as well. What we have to remember is, again, when we send a message, we are not just sending it based on, what we think is going to be received. We're sending it, and people are receiving it in a way that comes up for them. So let me explain a little more. So you just shared that there were two younger folks in this peer group that had this reaction. And I'm going to diagnose this through a few pieces of data that I know from my research on communication. It may or may not be true in this situation, but this is how I would diagnose it. First and foremost, we've all been familiar with the double bind, which shows that when a woman is assertive at work, she can sometimes be seen as harsh or rude, not always, direct and succinct. And what data shows is that is not only a phenomenon in person, it is also a phenomenon in digital communication. I have heard from several leaders who that are female that have said, I've been asked to, I would call it flower my messages a little more to seem a little more likable. And I like to say that issue sucks and it's not fair, but it is something that does exist in the work as well.
That
and
is
not be the case.
so interesting. And I mean, anybody that knows me knows that I have a long-term relationship with Nando Parado, who is from Uruguay. So he is super Latin. And early on, I did the typical Gail communication, and it just was so off-putting to him. So over the years, I learned to write, get my points down, and then start it with oh, how are you? Warm hug to the family, which to me is just like not even, I mean, we are such close friends. Now I can't imagine not writing an email that way, but it really took some training to realize that was going to be really important in that relationship to put a little flowery there.
Exactly. And it's again, knowing. So when we meet someone in person, we mirror their body language. When they smile, we smile. When they lean in, we tend to lean in. We're doing the same thing in our digital communication as well.
Okay. So this is
eating their cues.
Okay. So this might be where this falls. I am very aware of exclamation points in business emails, particularly when it's like several exclamation points.
Right.
So I tend to coach the team like, let's be really careful with these exclamation points.
Let's lighten it up. Yeah.
Am I being old school, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, exclamation points imply a few things. Excitement, urgency is another thing that exclamation points can imply. Sometimes people can see them as shouting as well, right? So it depends on the situation as well. But most of the cases, especially among women, they're seen as excitement. Okay. Now, we use them because we don't have the body language cues, right? We want people to feel that we're happy, we're grateful. But it is easy for us to sometimes go overboard on exclamation points if we don't know our audience. So my answer, Gail, here is I like to train teams to say, know your audience and have norms around that. If it's a client, we don't use exclamation points, right? With the power differential, but we may add them if they start to use them, right? If it's an internal team email, we may want to use them. Especially sometimes younger team members show their authenticity in digital mediums, because we have to remember, especially that pretty much all of Gen Z and younger millennials grew up in an age where exclamation points had meaning.
One thing I'd love for you to elaborate on is the power differential. I had a 20-year corporate career. You worked in corporate, so I get it. I understand hierarchy. I think some of the younger people that join my team who've never worked in a corporate setting don't really understand or appreciate all that goes into this power differential. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I think this is such an important point, and this is a big topic underneath what often gets discussed as entitled behavior among junior employees. So, there are a lot of cues that we learned in the corporate environment. Cues like when you are sending an email to a number of people, the first person on the to line tends to be the most powerful. The people on the CC line are like those around the boardroom, right? These are cues that we learned. The signature in our email is formal, warm regards, best regards. When I got an email from my Gen Z teammate, it didn't have any of that, right? She didn't understand. She had never grown up in that type of cultural environment. She had grown up in an age of instant messaging and shorthand phrases and no signatures at all. And so I think what we have to remember, and I'll use an example here of a head of HR who told me that she had some junior team members ask if they could join one of her meetings with a senior leader. And at first she was totally shocked. She said, how could they ask me that? I worked so hard, to get invited to these senior leader meetings. I would have never asked when I was early on in my career to join the meeting. But what she's learned from that is that a lot of it had to do with the fact that they haven't seen a lot of that hierarchy. And what she's learned is that over time, she moved from sort of resentment to curiosity, and that maybe actually inviting them to the meeting would be beneficial and would be creative and would be meaningful if it wasn't a closed door topic. And so what I like to say, that's also the transition for leaders who would never use an emoji to one day they change their exclamation point to an emoji, right? It's like a rite of passage that I'm not saying necessarily with clients, but internally, communication is getting more informal. And there are certain cases where if you want to resonate with a junior team or a team across distances where body language isn't as present, it can be helpful to be more informal or to allow for a less hierarchical format. But again, when you're connecting externally, I would always err on the side of formal communication.
Excellent points. One big change I have really made, and it seems to be working well, is scheduling my emails. I love to get caught up on the weekend, and I used to just let them fly. And now it is so easy to drop down and put Monday morning. So thank you for that advice. I am following that, and it's working well.
People love it, and it really does help. So for anyone listening, if you have an idea at midnight, maybe schedule that email to go out at 8 a.m. so it can be read at the right hour for your team in a way that they can be thoughtful about responding.
Perfect. Okay. I really do feel like I've been to a therapy session. Thank you so much.
I am always here for you, Gail. I love working with GDA, best bureau in the marketplace. And, I truly believe that as we hone our skills around communication in this digital age, we can do great things in our businesses, in our communities, and beyond.
I love it. I love it. I know you're not just a communications expert. You also have a lot about culture. And I know that you think it is a myth that culture is created in the workplace, like in the office, not in the workplace. I didn't say that right. In the office. Now, for an old school gal who's always been in the office, talk me through this. I'm trying to be adaptable, but help me understand that it's not created in the office.
Yeah. Well, research showed well before the pandemic that virtual teams can far outperform co-located teams. And the reason is that the key driver of great trust in teams is not about reducing their physical distance. It's about something called affinity distance, which is our level of shared values, interdependence, psychological safety, trust within our team. We've all seen many toxic workplaces where everyone's in the office, right? Where they all have their butts in seats, but nobody trusts each other and is backstabbing each other. And so what I think is really important, and a conversation that really, I think, was amplified through the pandemic and continues, is this fact that data has shown that culture was never built in the office. It was built by our rituals of communication and collaboration, how we met, how we celebrated, how we stayed inclusive, what our team spirit norms were. What were some of the collaboration behaviors we had? And when teams got those things right, they were able to really thrive, whether it's virtual, fully virtual teams, hybrid teams, and in-person teams. But if they didn't, it would fall flat. And I think that a lot of the debate around being in the office or being virtual is the wrong question. We all know all of those formats matter. And if you can be in the office, be in the office. You get better, brainstorming, you get body language, you get to recognize people. But I think the question was wrong in whether we were in the office or hybrid or virtual. The question is, how are we enhancing our collaboration behaviors in all of these environments? Because that's what real life work is now. How is our meeting culture better than it was pre-pandemic? What are our team spirit norms so that we're maximizing our time when we're in the office, but we're staying inclusive to our colleagues living in Denver or living in New York? What are our collaboration norms? Because we work on 5 different collaboration mediums now: text, Slack, email, video calls, meeting in person, you name it. And when we get those things right, we thrive no matter the distance.
Love it. Love it. You mentioned the word ritual, about having rituals within our office. Again, back to our theme here of backstage pass. Right before you go on stage, are there any rituals that you have as a speaker?
There are. I'm
Ooh.
a big believer in energy and bringing energy to my audiences. It's what many clients have told me is one of my greatest gifts. And my ritual, I do a breathing exercise. I'm also a student of Tony Robbins, and he has an amazing YouTube video called Priming. Anyone can check it out. And it's a breath work video that really gets you out of your mind and into your body. And so much, again, of keynote performances is performance.
It is a performance, and yours is really a performance.
Yes.
I love the way you get everybody out of their seats, and I love it.
Absolutely. Because again, we don't just think with our heads, we think with our whole bodies. And so, I do a breath work exercise called Priming. You can check it out on YouTube. And also sometimes I dance. I throw on a Beyonce video or on my iTunes, and I just move and dance or do jumping jacks, depending on if I'm in front of people or not. If it's the green room alone, I'll actually dance, and it completely shifts my energy.
So now the secret is out. The green room is not about the purple grapes. It's about alone time to get the energy right for going on
No, it's
stage.
not about the blue M&Ms. It is about priming yourself to deliver.
What's the craziest thing that's ever happened to you on stage, Erica?
I was thinking about this. This is such a funny question, and I couldn't come up with an amazing one. But one time, when I get mic'd up, I always hook my mic in my bra strap because I wear dresses. And there was one time I was speaking at the Simmons Women's Leadership Conference, thousands of people in the room. And I give so much credit to all those backstage, the mic runners, the MCs, they do so much incredible work. But one time I didn't double check to make sure that the guy that put my mic on in my bra strap had turned it on or off. And it was off when I went on stage. And so the mic didn't work. And so this guy comes on stage, opens my dress in front of everyone to turn it on. So that was a little crazy, but here's what I did. I said, I cannot take 60 seconds away from my audience in the first minute of my keynote without engaging them. So here's what I did. I said, we're having a little tech snafu. I'd like everyone to turn to a partner in this room and share one insight you've had so far from this conference. So immediately everyone turned to a partner. Then we fixed the bra strap and then we went back to it. But here's what it did. It showed that I'm human. It showed that I was adaptable. It allowed everyone to start talking and engaging. Research shows if you get everyone engaged at an event within the first 5% of a meeting, they're much more likely to participate for the remaining 95% of the meeting. And, it reminded me about the importance of always pivoting. So that's what
I like to think of it as the ability to think on your feet. And you certainly demonstrated that. You've done a lot of these talks. What is the most meaningful feedback that you've ever received? Because that's obviously got to be a part of what keeps you doing it. So I'm curious, share some of that meaningful feedback.
Yeah, I'm so truly honored to do this work. I'm trying to pinpoint one, but there's so many people that I've been lucky to share this research with and that have come to me with how much they've been able to change things in their organization, or even just the simple, this was so practical. I know exactly what I can do tomorrow to help me, that there's so many, but if I had to pick one, it would be an email I got from a husband-wife couple. And this husband-wife couple both saw me keynote at their own separate companies. They both work at different companies. And somehow over dinner one night, they put together that they had both heard me speak and they talked about it. And their first question, and this was months later, it was, did she make you dance too? Now, one of my favorite things I like to do with certain audiences, not all audiences, is get them moving, getting them stand up, getting them thinking in different ways. And I often surprise them with a little Bollywood dance exercise. And one of the things they emailed me and they said, what you did, the way you engaged at both of our companies completely changed the energy of how we thought about the topic that we had. And there's so many times that people said, this is so practical, this is so great. But what I like to believe, and what I'm always reminded, is people don't remember what you said or what you did, but how you made them feel. And here's a husband-wife couple, where the first question wasn't the topic, it's really how they felt and what that did for their team or their organization. And so I just think that's really meaningful, because it reminds me that, this work is not just about great ideas, it's about transformative experiences.
I think that you do this because of connection. And I think that story is the ultimate connection. A couple, two different places, talking about it, following up with you. So the connection's there. Your energy is infectious. I think your content is spot on, and it is just an absolute privilege to work with you. And I'm thrilled that you joined us today, Erica.
Gail, I like to say you are the GOAT of the bureau industry. I feel so humbled to work with GDA and can't wait to continue to create amazing experiences for clients.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on Backstage Pass with Gail Davis. Tune in for more exclusive interviews and pro tips to elevate your events. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts with us. We'll catch you next time behind the curtain on Backstage Pass.